How about Mike? Can you hear me?
Yep. How was jury duty today?
That was boring. What happened is it was kind of funny because this one lady and I walked into the wrong building, went to Grant Street, that big old building. It was
Yep.
actually a civil case, so it was right next door. And so, I was talking to her and she was just, we both went up to the fifth floor, and the elevator only had 5 floors, and we thought there were stairs, because you got to go to the seventh floor, to get to the jury duty. But we were in the wrong building, so it only went up to the fifth floor. And so I was saying, yeah, maybe it's like a Hogwarts place, you have to get in a certain column. But anyway, they told us it was like next door, so we went up to the seventh floor, and we were waiting around for a long time. And then what happened was, they interview all the jurists, and ask them questions one after another. And then there was a lunch break, and I went to get lunch at Jamba Juice. I always wanted to go there. You ever had a Jamba Juice?
No.
It's you know what that's named after?
I remember we talked about it before. It's like one of the fruits.
It's a heavenly plant. It's a tree on Mount Jambudweep. And they have mangoes the size of elephants, and they fall from like 10,000 feet, and they produce a river of nectar, which creates gold on the banks, so for the demigods to decorate themselves with. But anyway, that's a pretty good name for for a juice company, but it was pretty delicious. And then after I came back, they said, well, the judge is in the chambers right now with the lawyers. They're working on something. And then they said, well, it's the plaintiffs made a settlement. So it's, that they sent us home, That's what sometimes it happens that way, they just don't want a jury trial, It was a complicated case anyway. It was like an asbestos suit from one guy who got cancer, but the guy smoked, so there's this and that, So, I didn't want to waste my time with that, but Krishna got me out of it somehow or other. I was praying to Nrsingadev. I was wearing my Nrsingadev mask. maybe he made them settle or something. I don't know. But it's good to be here. I would, even if they would have had the trial, I think they don't keep you there until after like 4:30.
Okay.
They don't, they'll keep there the whole day. You show up at 8:30, but they won't keep you there till after that, because people have lives too, So we are on
Text 3.
text 3. Thursday's Gorpanim.
Yeah.
I was initiated 43 years ago in Gorpanim. So I'm 43. That's my age, and I'm sticking to it. It's like Jack Benny, how old is Jack Benny? Oh, it's 33. That shows my age because I know who Jack Benny is. He always said, I'm 33 years old now. But anyway, let me read the first one, and we'll take turns reading the paragraphs, because this is kind of I think there's 4 paragraphs, but I'll read up to the translation, and you can read the first paragraph. Shri Bhagavan-vacha Aksharam Brahma Paramam Swabhavo Dhyatamam Uchate Bhuta Bhavo Bhavakaro Visarga Karma Samgita. Synonyms. Shri Bhagavan-vacha. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, Aksharam, indestructible, Brahma, Brahman, Paramam, transcendental, Swabhava, internal nature, Adhyatmam, the self, Uchate, is called Bhuta Bhava Utbhava Kara, action producing the material bodies of the living entities. Visarga, creation, karma, fruit of activities. Samgita is called, translation, the Supreme Lord said, the indestructible, transcendental living entity is called Brahman, and his eternal nature is called the self. Action pertaining to the development of these material bodies is called karma, or fruit of activities. You can read the first paragraph.
Purport: Brahman is indestructible and eternally existing, and its constitution is not changed at any time. But beyond Brahman, there is Parabrahman. Brahman refers to the living entity, and Parabrahman refers to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The constitutional position of the living entity is different from the position he takes in the material world. In material consciousness, his nature is to try to be the Lord of matter, but in spiritual Krishna consciousness, his position is to serve the Supreme. When the living entity is in material consciousness, he has to take on various bodies in the material world. That is called karma, or varied creation by the force of material consciousness. In Vedic literature, the living entity is called Jivatma and Brahman, but he is never called Parabrahman. The living entity, Jivatma, takes different positions. Sometimes he merges into the dark material nature and identifies himself with matter, and sometimes he identifies himself with the superior spiritual nature. Therefore, he is called the Supreme Lord's marginal energy. According to his identification with material or spiritual nature, he receives a material or spiritual body. In material nature, he may take a body from any of the 8,400,000 species of life, but in spiritual nature, he has only one body. In material nature, he sometimes manifested as a man, demigod, an animal, a beast, bird, etc., according to his karma. To attain material heavenly planets and enjoy their facilities, he sometimes performs sacrifices, yajna, but when his merit is exhausted, he returns to earth again in the form of a man.
You can read the rest of it, I guess.
In the process of sacrifice, the living entity makes specific sacrifices to attain specific heavenly planets and consequently reaches them. When the merit of sacrifice is exhausted, then the living entity descends to earth in the form of rain, then takes on the form of grains, and the grains are eaten by man, transformed into semen, which impregnates a woman, and thus the living entity once again attains the human form to perform sacrifice, and so repeat the same cycle. In this way, the living entity perpetually comes and goes on the material path. The Krishna conscious person, however, avoids such sacrifices. He takes directly to Krishna consciousness and thereby prepares himself to return to Godhead. Impersonalist commentators on the Gita unreasonably assume that Brahman takes the form of Jiva in the material world. And to substantiate this, they refer to chapter 15, verse 7 of the Gita. But this verse also speaks of the living entity as an eternal fragment of myself. The fragment of God, the living entity, may fall down into the material world, but the Supreme Lord, Achyuta, never falls down. Therefore, this assumption that the Supreme Brahman assumes the form of Jiva is not acceptable. It is important to remember that in Vedic literature, Brahman, the living entity, is distinguished from Parabrahman, the Supreme Lord.
Yeah, I remember reading, I think it was Life Comes from Life, and Prabhupada, his doctor told him, you have to walk, because he had like 2 heart attacks at sea, and he had a couple of very, scary situations when he was preaching, and so he had to take care of himself. And so he hated hospitals and everything. But when the doctor told him you have to take a morning walk, and he said, Krishna is speaking through you. And so he started taking morning walks, and so much nectar was recorded. That Life Comes from Life, when he was on the shores of the Pacific Ocean, that verse, that whole book with Prabhupada is walking with his scientists, devotees, like what's his name, Swarup Damodar Goswami. He was a real scientist, and Prabhupada was explaining how the living entity takes birth. He comes down to from the spiritual or the heavenly planets in the form of rain, which takes the form of grains. The grains are eaten by man, which is transformed into the seed, which impregnates a woman. And then Swarup Damodar said, "Oh, that's horrible." So, it was kind of like, but you might doubt that. You think, wow, that's crazy. I mean, the heaven's up there and we're down here. Is that how the souls get fall down into the atmosphere or something? But you can't like really analyze these things according to our teeny tiny brains. We just have to accept whatever is the Vedas they're saying, and then listen to the verification in and of itself. And when we listen to it, then it will become true. And it's not like we're brainwashed. It's just because the evidence is itself the Vedas, the Sabda Brahma, the Śikṣāṣtaka. It's the truth is coming through in the form of the disciplic succession and the Vedas. And, sometimes you can't understand it, but that doesn't, you can't understand anything any other way. It might be doubt, you may have doubts, but the thing is just keep listening, because how else can you understand it? How are you going to know how the living entity falls down from the higher planets into this material world? You can't understand. It's a chuta. It's inconceivable, and it's you'll never understand. But there are so many things in the Vedas that you just have to take and try to understand it according to its own evidence. Just like a jury will hear the preceding arguments. We learn from the Shastra what is true, what is not true, and we understand what is real and not real by the evidence of the transcendental sound vibration. That's what we have to trust, not our, not the scientists, because they have imperfect senses. Even their instruments are imperfect, and so that's the bottom line. If you just trust that, then you'll be good. What else do you need to know? All we know is really that Krishna is God. And even if you may have doubts about this or that, but the fact remains that without a doubt, Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and all the acharyas have said so. And he's just wonderful. So what more do you need? If you take the word of Krishna, then you go back to Godhead. You need any more than that? There's nothing higher to be attained than that fact. So, because if you know the nature of Krishna's appearance and disappearance, then you don't have to take birth again, and you don't have to do jury duty. But we'll just take turns reading each verse now because they're pretty short, I think. Adi bhutam ksharo bhava shadi daivatam adi yagno hamevatra deha deha britam vara. Adi bhutam, the physical manifestation, kshara, constantly changing, bhava, nature, purusha, the universal form, cha, and adi daivatam, including all demigods like the sun and moon. Adi Yajna, the super soul, aham, I, Krishna, eva, certainly, atra, this, in this, deha body, deha britam, of the embodied vara, the supreme. The physical nature is known to be endlessly mutable. The universe in the cosmic form of the Supreme Lord, and I am that Lord, represented as the super soul, dwelling in the heart of every embodied being. Report, the physical nature is constantly changing. That's what it means by endlessly mutable. The material world, there's so many ways you can get lost in the material world, and travel down the primrose path to hell. There's so many, it says in the Bible, I think, that there's, the way to hell is wide, but the straight and narrows are very, one-pointed. But, there's so many distractions in the material world, and the physical nature is constantly changing. The material body generally passes through 6 stages. They're born, they grow, they remain for some duration, they produce some byproducts, they dwindle, and they vanish. This physical nature is called Adi Bhutam because it's created at a certain point and it'll be annihilated at a certain point. The conception of the universal form of a Lord that includes all the demigods and their different planets is called Adi Daivatam. Daiva means, demigods. The individual soul, jiva, accompanies the body. The super soul, the plenary expansion of Lord Krishna, is called the Paramatma or Adignyajya. It's situated in the heart. The word eva is particularly important in this context because of this verse, because by this word, the Lord stresses that the Paramatma is not different from him. Eva is just like an explanation point. It just says, this is absolutely true. The super soul, the Supreme Personality of God, is seated beside the individual soul as the witness of the individual soul's activities and is the source of consciousness. The super soul gives the jiva an opportunity to act freely, and he witnesses his activities. The functions of all these direct manifestations of the Supreme Lord automatically become clarified for the pure Krishna conscious devotee engaged in transcendental service of the Lord. The gigantic universal form of the Lord, called Adi Daivatam, is contemplated by the neophyte who cannot approach the Supreme Lord in his manifestation of the super soul. The neophyte is advised to contemplate the universal form, whose legs considered lower planets, whose eyes considered the sun and moon, whose head is considered the upper planetary system. Yeah, that's like if someone just like doesn't understand the idea of a super soul and doesn't understand how the supreme person can be a person, they're just told to worship the universal form of the Lord. It's not actually even a real form. Even when Arjuna was displayed the universal form by Krishna, it's not his real eternal form. It's just he manifested that form just so that the atheist wouldn't be able to say, if somebody says, "Oh, I'm God," okay, well, display your universal form then, or lift Govardhan Hill if you're God. They said, "I am the sun. I'm moving the sun. I'm moving the moon," and then they get a toothache and they have to go to the dentist. So these people are not God. So to prove that Krishna is God, he manifested his. Because Arjuna wanted to see it. Of course, when he saw it, he was afraid. He said, "Don't, please, don't show me this," because it was pretty awesome, and he was afraid of like committing offenses to the supreme person, and he wanted to see Krishna in his personal form again, because that's the way he knew him, so that's the way the devotees want to see Krishna in his two-handed form. See the next verse here. Go ahead.
Text 5. Antakale chamameva smaran muktva kalevaram yaprayati sadma bhavam yati naste atra samshaya. Synonyms. Antakale, at the end of life. Cha, also. Mam, unto me. Eva, certainly. Smaran, remembering. Muktva, quitting. Kalevaram, the body. Ya, he who. Prayati, goes. Sa, he. Madbhavam, my nature. Yati, achieves. Na, not. Asti, there is. Atra, here. Samshaya, doubt. Translation. And whoever at the time of death quits his body, remembering me alone, at once attains my nature. Of this, there is no doubt. Purport. In this verse, the importance of Krishna consciousness is stressed. Anyone who quits his body in Krishna consciousness is at once transferred to the transcendental abode of the Supreme Lord. The word smaran, remembering, is important. Remembrance of Krishna is not possible for the impure soul who has not practiced Krishna consciousness in devotional service. To remember Krishna, one should chant the Maha Mantra, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Incessantly, following in the footsteps of Lord Chaitanya, being more tolerant than the tree, humbler than the grass, and offering all respects to others without requiring respect in return. In such a way, one will be able to depart from the body successfully, remembering Krishna, and so attain the supreme goal.
So there is one devotee who was thinking like that, and he was worried that at the time of death, his voice would be choked up and he wouldn't be able to chant Hare Krishna. So he prayed to Krishna. He said, "Let my mind be entangled in the lotus stems of your feet, like a swan. A swan likes to play in the lotus flowers and get tangled up in the stem. So in the same way, let me die immediately. And so that then I can remember you quitting my body," because it is really important that one think of Krishna at the time of death, because whatever you think of at the time of death, that state you'll attain without fail. So if we're always remembering Krishna at every moment, because death could come at any moment, then we'll be in a proper position to be transported out of this material body and back to the spiritual world. Otherwise, our voice might be choked up, our memory might not be there, if we're severely distressed. That's why King Kulakshekar, I think his name was, that he said that prayer. Some devotees are like that. They prepare. Devotees it's like the final exam. The final exam is the test. And if you pass the test, then you go back to Godhead. George Harrison was always thinking in that way. He was always thinking, this is just the preparation so I can prepare myself to go back to the spiritual world. And he was always thinking like that. He was always, having that mortal, um, awareness. So we should all think like that. But
How does this
it becomes more and more prominent as we get older, because it's like a yellow light. The old, having an older body, my skin is getting all wrinkled. If I look at my hands, they're all more wrinkled than they were like 2 years ago even. And so the body's falling apart every moment. It's like a yellow light, and the yellow light is just a reminder that the light is going to turn red, and so you better prepare yourself. So that's an important conception. I think there's a saying, live every day as if it were your last. So that's it's just a matter of urgency, if we understand that the frailness of this material body and how death could come at any moment. And, we can't be comfortable, even especially young people are just like, they don't have a care in the world. And Prabhupada said, my devotees are, the problem with the people in the West is that they're not afraid of Maya, and they're not afraid of death. But that's what they're, the most wonderful thing in the world, Raj Yudhisthira said, is that the people are thinking they're not going to die, even though everybody's dying around them. They think they're not going to die. It's amazing how, Krishna's external energy covers people over and makes them not think of that because they don't want to think about it. That's all. And so they're in denial. You can go ahead and read this verse. Wait a minute, it's the next one. I thought I.
No, that's the next one. No, I think
This one, or did I get
text 5 and 6 are very, very similar.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I thought it was the same. Okay, go ahead. It was text 6.
Yam yam vapi smaran bhavam chajati ate kalevaram tam tam evaiti kunteya saratadbhava bhavita. Synonyms: yam yam, whatever; va, either; api, also; smaran, remembering; bhavam, nature; chajati, give up; ante, at the end; kalevaram, this body; tam tam, similar; eva, certainly; iti, gets; kuntiya, O son of Kunti; sara, always; tat, that; bhava, state of being; bhavita, remembering. Translation: whatever state of being one remembers when he quits his body, that state he will attain without fail. Purport: the process of changing one's nature at the critical moment of death is here explained. How can one die in the proper state of mind? Maharaj Bharat thought of a deer at the time of death, and so was transferred to that form of life. However, as a deer, Maharaj Bharat could remember his past activities. Of course, the cumulative effect of the thoughts and actions of one's life influences one's thoughts at the moment of, and actions of one's life influences one's thoughts at the moment of death. Therefore, the actions of this life determine one's future state of being. If one is transcendently absorbed in Krishna's service, then his next body will be transcendental, spiritual, not physical. Therefore, the chanting of Hare Krishna is the best process for successfully changing one's state of being to transcendental life.
You know the story of Maharaj Bharat? He left his kingdom. He had a whole kingdom. He left his family, he left his kingdom, he left his wealth and everything. And he was performing austerities on the bank of in a little hut, because that's what you do when you're in Vedic culture. You take Vanaprastha and you go away. And so, but he was sitting there in his little bhajan kutir, and there was a mother deer that was right across from the stream, and there was a lion that was right next to it, and it roared very loudly. It scared the deer, and the deer miscarried, and the fawn, it dropped the fawn in the creek, and so Maharaj Bharat took that fawn took care of it, and he developed attachment for it, so much so that when like the fawn would like nudge him while he was like meditating and stuff, and he would feel the little soft horns on his back, because they're just new, it was just a baby fawn. And so he became very attached to it. That's how animals like show their affection. They just nudge you a little bit. And so he was thinking of that fawn, and he was disregarding his own spiritual process. And so one time the fawn was like wandering in the woods, and he went off, and he said, oh, maybe I committed an offense against this fawn, and so he was looking for it. And then he fell down and died. He was thinking of the fawn at the time of death. And so he became a deer. But he was protected by Krishna because of his past pious activities. He could remember. That's rare. Most people can't remember their past lives, but he was reminded of his past lives, and he as a deer, he was hanging out next to the ashrams of all these saintly persons in the same area as a deer. And he was like hanging out with them and trying to get their association. And then after that, after the deer died, he became Jad Bharat. And at that point, he didn't want to take any chances. He didn't even associate with people at all. And he pretended like he was deaf, dumb, and blind, or, he's just walking around like a madman, naked. And so, that's a whole nother story. But, he didn't want to take any chances and associate with materialistic people because he had already been through that. But it's rare that you remember your past life like that. And you don't want to take that chance, because the most dangerous type of fear, it says later on in the Bhagavad-gītā, is to die and take birth as an animal so that you don't have a chance to remember, and as an animal doesn't have the ability to contemplate God consciousness. That's the most dangerous type of fear. You got to go through the evolutionary process to come to a human being again. And that may take millions of births, so that's a big waste of time, so you want to finish up in this lifetime. So that's the story of Maharaj Bharat. Wait a minute, okay. So here's the next verse. Text 7. Tasmat sarveshu kaleshu yamam mam anusmara yudhyacha mai arpita mano buddhir mam evasyasi asamsaya. Tasmat, therefore, sarveshu, always, kaleshu, time, unto me, anusmara, go on remembering, yudhya, fight, cha, also, mai, unto me, arpita, surrender, mana, mind, buddhi, intellect, mam, unto me, eva, surely, esyasi, will attain asamsaya, beyond a doubt. Translation. Therefore, Arjuna, you should always think of me in the form of Krishna, and at the same time carry out your prescribed duty of fighting. With your activities dedicated to me and your mind and intelligence fixed on me, you will attain me without a doubt. Purport. This instruction to Arjuna is very important for all men engaged in material activities. The Lord does not say to give up, that one should give up his prescribed duties or engagements. One can continue them, but at the same time think of Krishna by chanting Hare Krishna. This will free one from material contamination and engage the mind and intelligence in Krishna. By chanting Krishna's names, the one will be transferred to the supreme planet, Krishna Loka, without a doubt. That's why Prabhupada says, you can go on doing your duty, even if you work in a factory, you're pushing buttons. You chant Hare Krishna and press the buttons. So I found that my own, it take me 30 or 40 years to ever even understand what devotional service is, because I was so entrenched in my own sense gratification. But the idea of chanting Hare Krishna while thinking of serving Krishna at the same time, and reading these books with the idea of service to Krishna. Service to Krishna is non-different than surrender. Service and surrender are parallel and simultaneous. But if you have the idea of service, you're no longer thinking of yourself. You're transferring your senses and your service and your intellect, your mind, body, and intelligence and work to Krishna's will instead of your own. Instead of satisfying your own senses, you're satisfying Krishna's senses. Whatever way Krishna wants you to do that, Krishna will tell you through these verses. And then you can be sure in your activities, because Krishna confirms it from within as a super soul and from without by the spiritual master. And you can always read and chant and I'll do that all day long, and then you'll be completely engaged in Krishna's service, and you'll be fixed in your determination. Otherwise, the person that doesn't have that one-pointed determination, he will never understand devotional service. that was my fate, you know. I was barely like, I was hardly a devotee. I was just like something like an impersonalist, basically, because I was always thinking of myself and not really thinking of Krishna, even though I had the realization early on that this is a complete, you know, opposite of the mirror, you know. I'm thinking that I'm the center of activities, instead Krishna is the center of activities. It blew my mind, but I couldn't really put it into action, even though I had that theoretical realization, until I gave up all my selfish activities, you know. One who, you know, if you're bewildered by the sense activities, and, you know, for one who is engaged, I think this verse goes, for one who is absorbed in material happiness and is bewildered by such things, the resolute determination of devotional service does not take place. You can't be resolute. You might be sporadic, but you can't be one-pointed and fixed and steady in your service until you completely have that service and surrender attitude, one-pointed service and surrender. Otherwise, it's just not going to happen, because the mind is all over the place. The mind is very strong. The mind will carry you away, even of a man of determination. You know, you can be determined all you want, but if it's based on a false ego, it's not going to help. You know, it's like you can try to see. If you're blind, if you have cataracts on your eyes, you can try. You can have all the determination that you want, even for devotional service. But, you know, if you unless you take a scalpel and remove the cataract, somebody does that for you, you're not going to be able to see on your own volition. You have to have somebody that will perform that surgical operation, and then your eyes will be smeared with the salve of love if you're under the care of a devotee physician, and then you'll be able to see Krishna very clearly. Go ahead.
Text 8. Abhyasya yoga yuktena cetasa nanya gamina paramam purusham divyayam yati parthanuchintayan. Synonyms. Abhyasa, practice. Yoga yuktena, being engaged in meditation. Cetasa, by the mind and intelligence. Na anya gamina, without being deviated. Paramam, the Supreme. Purusham, personality of Godhead. Divyam, transcendental. Yati, achieves. Partha, O son of Partha. Anuchintayan, constantly thinking of. Translation. He who meditates on the Supreme Personality of Godhead, his mind constantly engaged in remembering me, undeviated from the path, he, O Partha, Arjuna, is sure to reach me. Purport. In this verse, Lord Krishna stresses the importance of remembering him. One's memory of Krishna is revived by chanting the Mahamantra, Hare Krishna. By the practice of chanting and hearing the sound vibration of the Supreme Lord, one's ear, tongue, and mind are engaged. This mystic meditation is very easy to practice, and it helps one attain the Supreme Lord. Purusham means enjoyer. Although living entities belong to the marginal energy of the Supreme Lord, they are in material contamination. They think themselves enjoyers, but they are not the Supreme Enjoyer. Here it is clearly stated that the Supreme Enjoyer is the Supreme Personality of Godhead in his different manifestations and plenary expansions, such as Narayan, Vasudeva, etc. The devotees can constantly think of the object of worship, the Supreme Lord, in any of his features, Narayan, Krishna, Rama, etc., by chanting Hare Krishna. This practice will purify him, and at the end of his life, due to his constant chanting, he will be transferred to the kingdom of God. Yoga practice is meditation on the super soul within. Similarly, by chanting Hare Krishna, one fixes his mind always on the Supreme Lord. The mind is fickle, and therefore it is necessary to engage the mind by force to think of Krishna. One example often given is that of the caterpillar that thinks of becoming a butterfly and so is transformed into a butterfly in the same life. Similarly, if we constantly think of Krishna, it is certain that at the end of our lives, we shall have the same bodily constitution as Krishna.
Yeah, it's really a far out analogy. You know, speaking of insects, you know, just like the worm thinks of being a butterfly, the caterpillar. Similarly, whatever we think of, we will become like, which is interesting when when it comes to like what you meditate on all day, people are thinking of, this is my friend and this is my enemy, and they're meditating on their enemy all day long, like all the MAGA Trumpers are thinking Joe Biden is my enemy. There's a guy right down the hill that has a Let's Go Brandon flag. He's always constantly meditating on Joe Biden, how evil he is. And then similarly, all the libtards or liberals, they're always thinking of Trump and the MAGA people and thinking they're just like not even human beings. They're so evil. They've tried to bring down democracy and they're meditating on them constantly. You know who those libtards, those people who always talk about Trump, are going to be in their next life? They're going to be Trump because they're thinking of Trump all day long. And the MAGA people they're going to be like Joe Biden or Nancy Pelosi. They'll take birth as Nancy Pelosi, because it says in the Bhagavad-gītā, the 11th canto, there was a wasp that had cornered an insect in a hole in a tree, and the insect was very afraid, and it meditated on the wasp in fear all day long, and then it became kind of like mentally it became the wasp, and then in its next life it indeed became a wasp, just like Jad Bharat became a deer by meditating on a deer. So whatever you meditate on, even if you hate it, that you will become in your next life. And so similarly, we have to think of Krishna, because then we'll be liberated from this bodily conception. We won't think in terms of this person is good or that person is bad, or I hate this person or I like this person. These are all material considerations. Krishna is above all material considerations. The living entities are just being they're part of this material nature, and whatever we think are good or bad qualities, we shouldn't meditate on that. We should just think of them as parts of the material nature, which is ultimately controlled by Krishna. And if we meditate on Krishna, then we'll become like Krishna in our next life, So I just wanted to show you one thing before we end here. This is I was thinking about this when I was reading a chapter today about how Lord Chaitanya came back from Gaya and he started the Sankirtan movement after he met his spiritual master. His heart was like completely absorbed in Krishna after he got initiated. He was like doing that just as an example. He's the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but he was in a covered form before when he was a scholar, in Nadia. Is Nimai, Nimai Pandit. He was a big pundit. He could defeat anybody. He was kind of arrogant too. But when he came back, he was like really humble, and he was chanting and swooning in ecstasy. And there's one verse where when he came back, he would do kirtan at Srivas Pandit's house. It's called the Srivas Sangam. He would do all night kirtans. And Lord Chaitanya, he was like accepting all the blessings of the devotees. They were so happy that he was becoming a devotee, and he accepted their service and he accepted their blessings, and he was so glad that the Vaishnavas were blessing him like that. We hope that you become a devotee. They were always praying like that in their mind, and so Lord Chaitanya accepted their service, and he started doing kirtan every single night. And so this coming Thursday is Lord Chaitanya's appearance day, and we should have a similar attitude, because devotees are the only way that we can attain Krishna. And Lord Chaitanya gave an example of that by exemplifying service to the devotees and accepting their blessings as an example for us to follow. So we have to become humble and understand that the devotees are the only way to get to Krishna. And I just quoted this verse. It's actually from the 11th canto of the Bhagavad-gītā. And it goes like this. Can you see that sun? Okay, it says, my devotees bestow divine eyes, whereas the sun only allows only external light, and that only when it is risen in the sky. My devotees are one's real worshipable deities and real family. They are one's real self, and ultimately they are non-different from me. That's why it's important to associate with devotees, especially on a special holiday like Gaur Purnima. So I hope you can come to Gaur Purnima. It'll be a fantastic kirtan and Abhishek. They're going to be bathing Nitai Gaur. I'm sure Shyamasundar will be there bringing his own deities. So I hope you can make it. And otherwise, I'll see you on Wednesday.
Great. Sounds good.
Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Krishna.